band back.
Look at
Trey's
Trey's
got
got
a
a
band
white
together, man.
Trey, you got a whiteboard in the back?
Yeah,
if I didn't know you better, I'd think you're an entrepreneur.
I figure it's a great idea generator for someone else.
The cleaning ladies put Fabuloso on it so you can go out to the supermarket and order it.
Yeah. Keeps it spotless.
Hey, Mr. Trey, can you please order Fabuloso?
It doesn't clean anything, but it smells great.
Yeah,
I love Fabuloso. They make trash bags with Fabuloso scent impregnated into them. I just found out.
Of course
they
do.
Man.
You just found that?
That's like denim napkins.
I just found that out. So anyway, on to serious stuff, guys. I'm going to make a little push here because I've just found out that we still have Summit tickets left. And my push is there's a lot of dentists coming solo. And as you both know, the knowledge isn't power, execution's power. And you can come out there and listen to all these great concepts and hear the hygiene and office manager and all these different ideas and sit there like, oh shit, I should have brought my team. So my suggestion, I've said this before, make sure you bring your team. I would actually say send your team and hang out at the casino at the Wynn, and you get more value than if you went alone without your team. So it's August 11th and 12th. It's not too late. Get on there today, bulletproofsummit.com. And then, of course, I'm going to ask you, Trey, to speak to that, and you, Dwight, to speak to that with very powerful teams like you both have. What do you say to that?
I took my team. I've taken quite a bit of the teams. Last year, I took a 9 or 10 of them, I think, and it was enormously helpful. Now this year, they're all anybody that's not going or anybody that is thinking about it has actually asked to be a part of it, or if we are going. So they had a great time doing it, not only from a learning standpoint, but you get to meet a lot of good people and hear a lot of good stuff. The hygiene aspect, the year before I brought all hygienists who are now in administrative roles in my practice. So everybody heard another aspect of hygiene of, hey, here's another level. Let's work towards it. And it's really empowering for them. It really drove our hygiene program forward. So I would be looking at anybody you can get in there and get some value to, because they will come home and it's almost like a third party endorsement.
Yeah. And by the way, the endorsement, speaking of that, thank you, Trey, is we're going to acknowledge the doctors that are brought their team. So, when you get there and you've brought your team, we're going to actually be acknowledging like this is a massive investment they've made, and you thank your doctor. It's huge. I just think like if I could go back and look at my own career, I was the nucleus of everything. I thought everybody was a dumbass. I was the one that was holding everybody back. And I hear that when I listen to business people on the phone, I could hear like the way they talk to people and the way they're like literally playing switchboard. I'm like, why are you even getting in the way? Like you as the business owner or leader just needs to set out the vision of where you want to go and then be clear and then let your team fill that space. Dwight, what say you to that?
Yeah, I mostly struggle with the fact that people think that somehow you're going to learn that amount of knowledge and take it back. I've done it too. I've gone places, come back, and I'm like, by the way, it needs to be this and this and this. I'm going through my notes and I'm like, we're going to add this, we're going to do this protocol. And I'm like, and about 80% of that dwindles away in the first 2 weeks because you're not coming back and actually training and developing your team on that information. The best way to do it is just to have it implemented. And the ROI on a lot of the things that we talk about that gets learned at a summit like this, it's so much information. It's just near impossible for you to just feel like you're going to get any amount to come back. That's not going to double down. If you are going to 10X the practice, think about if your hygienist is going to 10X her work. What if your assistant's going to 10X? What if your front desk learns new practical ways to interact with each other, develop as a team, your culture development? It is impossible to actually understand the ROI that comes along with that. But many of us want to carry that on our shoulders. And most of us have a great time. We learn a lot, and then we travel back and we try and start right away Monday morning, and we're kind of tired. And instead of having this hoorah moment about the team talking about what they learned and the others who didn't get a chance to go or whatever, and they're all kind of pulling all that data together, we're just tired and we're getting back into the flow of things. And I remember going to a lot of CE for many, many years and coming back to my practice and just being like too tired from everything going on. Yeah, and most of that left me. Right. And we can't be responsible for that. There's already too much going on. Right. So It was a huge ROI for me, and it still is. I always bring people with me. But my goal is to continue to bring and expose more and more people to it as much as possible. And I think we need to get away from the concept of investing in your people means they might leave you. Like, well, what's the quote? Is that at the end of the day, you should create an environment that what is it? Teach them
train them so well. Yeah, train them so well they could leave, but treat them so well they never do.
Well that they want to stay, right? And I think at the end of the day, we have such fear, right? Such a scarcity mindset of saying, well, I've got to keep from the idea of, if I overtrain them, then they're going to go somewhere else, or they're going to ask me for more money, or this. Like, just invest in your people. Just
right, but then,
in your own business.
Dwight, then you're also the guy that trains people. So there's a lot of people that will come to Fort Bend Dental Group. Like that's the place you go to learn.
Yeah.
And then also you said one other thing I want to touch upon, and then we'll move on. It's this idea that, you're going to come up with all the ideas and you are going to come back on Monday morning and tell them what to do. If people don't weigh in, they don't buy in. So what the summit is designed this year too, is to co-create. So the general content is for everyone. So everybody's in the same room. Hey, what are the big rocks? What's getting in your way? Hygienists are taking their notes, assistants, office managers, doctors, and it's compare notes. And then there's tactical time. Before you leave, what are you going to do? What's the implementation strategy? So it's not like this bullshit Monday morning, like I learned this. You're never leaving the scene of these decisions without an action plan, because let's face it, inspiration is perishable. And we can't just let it go and go out into hopium like that.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Peter, you have a slideshow, bud. I feel like I'm the JCal right now. I'm the
Jackass
monitor. Well, I take that as a major compliment because guys, have you seen?
The moderator actually has to put in work and do stuff and come prepared.
My God, Scarcity Pete, guys! I didn't know we got this version of you today. Just because your microphone sucks, and you crashed your laptop on the floor.
It's on the floor.
No. I just need a dog to kick, and he's a
I'm that dog.
White dog.
I'm not that. I don't know. I feel kind of
so confused by.
For those that don't know, Peter's calling me the dog. So go ahead and punch. Okay, Peter, pull your slideshow up. Let's get this dog and pony show up.
Okay.
Oh, speaking of dog and pony show, I got mentioned on Scott Galloway's podcast.
Do you have a clip of that?
Were you the dog
No,
or the
I don't.
pony? I'm confused.
I'm the dog and the pony.
Go ahead.
So Scott mentioned you, and he was basically just raving about how you're kind of the model for consolidation kind of thing. Wasn't that?
Yeah, he's on his Prof G podcast. They were talking about roll-ups and consolidation and all that stuff, and he just drops my name. He's like, hey, he actually called me his former dentist, which that's kind of always nice to hear that. But he did move to London, so maybe there's another person out there. But he just said, like, for those that are not really into their business and they're not operators and they don't want to do it, this is a good viable strategy. And he mentioned me in the light of like who's doing it really right and who's got technology. And it's cool when you set your practice up like the way the three of ours has it, where practices are different from each other, but most importantly they're different from everyone else's, so you can't slip into that sea of sameness. And I had a friend of mine that came to the practice today and was like, wow, I feel like I've been in the dark ages, in my dentist before. And I think it's, I don't know where I'm going with it, but I think it's incumbent upon the business owner and leader to differentiate your practice in whatever way you wish to do it.
Random question. This is going to be a marketing sidebar for you guys. Have you guys converted to Google Analytics 4?
What is Google?
So, all right. I know that's very in the
We're not
weeds
even an AI quarter, and he's already.
So
I didn't know we're going here, guys. I'm gonna go get some coffee.
No, stick around. You might learn something.
Okay.
Go on.
Sometimes you got to be technical in your business, buddy.
Sometimes.
Do you know what Google Analytics is, Craig?
Yes, I was joking. Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna hit record, by the way, so we can capture this.
We already are recording.
I'm just joking with you.
So Google made a pivot into something called Google Analytics 4, and they are discontinuing the UA, which is the Universal Analytics. So log into your platform, and you're probably going to get a bunch of flashing red lights that's saying like you need to convert. They are abandoning the old platform, and it's not, hey, we're upgrading you automatically. There is a process to go through, and it's a pain in the butt. And it's been a colossal failure on Google's part, but unfortunately it's the hoops we have to jump through. So I wanted to I'm going through right now. I thought it had been done, but it had been done inappropriately. So now I'm having to hire someone else to go back and fix and do and stuff like that. So something to look at it's these three things you want to look at if you're listening from a technical standpoint. Your Google Analytics, which is going to track everything. Your tag manager, Google Tag Manager, which is what your marketing company should be using for your campaigns from tagging standpoint to give attribution to where your marketing is coming from. And then your Google Search Console. Those three things should be talking to each other. Otherwise, you're getting improper data of knowing where your traffic is coming from an acquisition source, and where you're getting conversions and things like that. So the analytics sits at the top of kind of measuring stuff. Yeah. So I just mainly I was asking you guys to be like, yeah, we did it. It's all good. Blah, blah, blah. Boulden, do this, this, and this. But yeah, I just didn't know.
That's super intriguing. No, I haven't actually spent a lot of time on that.
You have to be the admin of your account. A lot of people are not, unfortunately, in dentistry, just like we've learned in masterminds. A lot of people aren't the people who actually own their domain. The domain is not owned in their account. So you have to be the admin on the account. And if you're not the custodian of that account, then it's a time for you to do that. And when you log in as the admin, like I said, they were supposed to abandon it July 1, guys. And by the grace of Google gods, they decided, because it's been such a colossal failure and it's been clunky for a lot of the industry, they are keeping it alive, but they will abandon. So all the data that you have, if you don't migrate appropriately, all the data that you've accumulated will be gone.
Wow. I just got back from coffee, so it's Analytics 4. Is that what I heard? Upgrade. No, I'm being serious. What do I need to tell my people and the powers at Google gods to do?
Just put in the
I'm
time
being serious.
Transition. Poor Pete.
Peter, listen, we got to hang out the other week. I flew up to Atlanta for the day. It was great. You know,
PowerPoint presentation on Google.
Did we start AI Corner and now? And
you want to start, tell us more technical talks. All right. So last week, we're doing this a little bit out of order. Last week, we did the LOI, right? Or the term sheet form, talking about private equity. And the spirit of it was to break down some terminology and things, and talk about some of the vices that are in some of these offers, why they aren't romantic, why they are romantic, where's the upside, where's the downside, where's the gotchas. That was really I think the spirit of it was just to explain to the industry, for people who don't see this all day, every day. Not that we see it all day, every day, but I think amongst the 80 plus years of experience, we've all probably seen, let's call it 20 term sheets of things like that we've had to kind of dig into. So it may have been kind of a master's class, and honestly, like as I kind of reflected back on what we discussed, we kind of really dissected it on a granular level. And there may be some things that you don't understand, and maybe it's not applicable right now. But I think just creating some of the awareness around it is a good exercise.
It's great. I love the content.
I remember sitting, guys. This is just an interesting sidebar. I remember sitting next to one of the OGs in Atlanta practices. You would know him. It's Goldstein, Garber, and Salam. I won't say which one I was sitting next to on the plane. I actually didn't know who it was, and we started talking. And I won't say which. And anyway, this is the time that they had sold to Heartland. And in conversation, it came. I was like, "Why'd you sell?" And he was like, "Pete, honestly, like the practice does X. I forget what he said at the time. Who the hell else was going to buy us?" Kind of thing, right? So sometimes where I'm going with this is that information that we went over on that term sheet might be applicable, not today, but it might be applicable down the road, because you may, by listening to this podcast, grow and scale your practice up where you only have a certain number of people that can afford. No single dentist may be able to come in and afford to buy, quote unquote, your practice. So Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes people like brush stuff off, like Craig is brushing off the Google Analytics. You brush it off because you don't think it's applicable to the world. It's not going to benefit you right now.
I wasn't brushing it off. I was just having
Well,
fun.
you do that with technology, and it's fine. That's
no, it's
that's fine.
For the listener, it's a joke. It was a joke. It's very, very.
I'm not offended, dude. I'm a full-grown man.
I think it's a huge deal for you to pay attention on these types of things, because if you are a business owner, at the end of the day, there's a great number of reasons why you want to continue and remain an entrepreneur. But a true business owner understands that that everything sunrises and everything sunsets in general processes. And at some point in time, it goes along with your own personal runway, and you need to know this stuff. And I'll be honest with you, I love the vulnerability, Pete. I want to call that out because I think that's a big deal, to just be like, hey, by the way, this is my deal. This is what
yeah, I got sweaty back, Dwight, from that after post recording. So I was like, was that the right move? And I felt called to it at the time, but I appreciate
why?
You saying.
Help me understand why.
Because it can go one of two ways, Craig. Someone can think the Dwight method, that's very transparent. Thanks for sharing. Appreciated that. Or it could go in other ways. Like, that's not, it could be.
Like you're saying, like it could be perceived as a humble flex. Is that what you're saying?
Maybe.
I think every single
is it the numbers that you get all sweaty on?
Yeah.
I think every single one of us. Every single one of us on this pod should do that.
Numbers a lot as dentists, right? We're comfortable discussing new patients to each other, not just us. I'm saying in general, you go to a conference, you're like, I get this many new patients. Oh, we do a top line revenue, but you're not comfortable with like really granular stuff, And so I don't know, Craig, I don't know why I have sweaty back. It was just my gut, but I'm happy we did it regardless. So we're not gonna.
Either way, Pete, you need to understand, I think that the right way to go about this is, if we're truly doing it in the spirit of learning, we should all be doing this. Every one of us in our practices, we should go and get appraised, go through this whole process and bring it on here and talk about it, because I think it's the best way to be truly transparent. I thought it was awesome. And you know what? I had some thoughts about it that I wrote on the side that I would either talk on that podcast about, or I'd talk to you about it. And I'm like, I really don't like this. And we all had a lot of different thoughts that were,
we did.
And what's interesting to me is a lot of people do not know much about what we're talking about. This is probably the number one. They don't know anything about this, and they're not hit square between the eyes until it's not just that an offer is made. It's that they are in a difficult situation in life where they have to sell, or a difficult situation where it comes up, and all of a sudden, you know what you're not thinking about at that time? Well, I should learn about this before I should apply it. No.
Or you're in a precarious position at closing table when you thought someone was advocating on your behalf. Like, right. Craig has an example of that happening when it is real estate agent, right? You think that people have your six in certain instances. You're either that's your doctor has your health in your health, or your real estate agent's got your health. And when you're trying to rent out a complex of yours, but like, just goes back to kind of like what I always talk about. You have to not be an expert at everything, but you have to be your own advocate at things that are super important to you. Your health, your business, your family, right? Like all these things you just have to advocate hard for and not rely on someone else, or else you're going to probably be disappointed. And so if you get to a closing table like this, Dwight, this could be your life's work that you could leave millions of dollars on the table for, or worse, you could be signing up for something that you can't fulfill.
Correct. Yep. And I was approached recently by another group, and I said to them, listen, I'm in such build mode right now. It doesn't make any rational sense as my Ebitda is scaling and doing what it needs to do. And they brought up an interesting point. They said, even our whole methodology is changed. And I said, well, tell me more about it, because I found it really interesting. It was something I was going to share last time, but it's we were kind of blown and going. We were hitting the top of the hour on that. And I found it super intriguing. So they said that post-COVID, because nobody wanted to look back and include COVID in their Ebitda components, is that now not only will you gain your multiple, whatever your multiple is for your buyout of your existing Ebitda, but they will actually give you, as regular capital gains, additional Ebitda growth for the next 3 years. to kind of
normalizing it.
That's a normalized run rate, what they're doing.
With the multiple.
And that is dangerous, Dwight, because guess what? That's performance based.
Right. So it works it cuts both ways.
It's looking to you like it's going to be very liberal and wow, that's nice of you. But they're like, yeah, we'll give it to you in advance, but be for certain that we will take it back if those metrics aren't hit.
Correct.
Right? So there's no risk for them. So that it's not as generous as you think.
No. What I'm saying is that is a newer model. A big
I don't think it's a newer model.
COVID.
I don't. Well, maybe post COVID, but I don't think that's a newer model. I think that is an attribution model for people who are always in growth mode. Because how do you not build a model for that? Because you've always got one in the dirt, so to speak.
Yeah.
And they want that. They like that. I mean, shit. That's what the Deca deal. Long time ago when it got that 18 multiple that everyone talked about from, Brian Caleo talks about.
Yes.
Is that model was built on 18 times earnings because of the fact that there were so many
future earnings.
So many emerging offices coming out of the ground that there had to be some attribution from a multiple standpoint.
Yes.
So by the way, those guys are crushing it. Shout out to Suleiman Ahmed, the CEO of Deca, and also I think the group president, the ADSO group president.
Yeah.
What a badass. He's got that great model. It's like that ideal dental model. And there was one right by my house. Right by my office. I was going to pick up something right by a Starbucks. It was really, really cool. He's going to really change the landscape on dentistry. I tip my hat to him. He's awesome.
Okay, so where I was going, sorry I went on that little tangent a little bit. Where I was going is that, I am a bit advocate of Twitter. My wife it used to be like, are you on social media? Now she's just like, you're on Twitter. I read Twitter a lot because I like to get in the mindset of people's streams. And you can follow intelligent people and really kind of it's educational for me and entertaining at the same time. So I found this thread where it was kind of talking about the terminology, right? The language of money. And I thought it was a good primer for when we were going to have the LOI talk. So we're kind of doing this a little bit in reverse. And I'm not sure how these pods are going to post, but I think it's a good place to start because, Craig, like you said, we get zero exposure to this. Trey, I think maybe you even said, a lot of people just know nothing about this. And there is no shame in that. You were not taught to do this. No school taught you. No one required it in a further CE. There was no postgraduate requirements to learn this. It was, hey, go start a business without having any business knowledge. And so that's kind of been like one of the tenets of Bulletproof, obviously, right? So I wanted to go over what I thought the language of money was, the terminology, the things that you see people bob their head to, and you think, they don't know what the hell I'm talking about, right? But they're bobbing their head, and you don't want to insult them by saying, hey, do you really understand what I'm saying? So I think this would be a good podcast to kind of just really talk about some terminology.
It's necessary, Pete. Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah. It's necessary because the narrative of sell is so pervasive. There's this constant force that you're being told you should do this. And so they're casting a very wide funnel, and that frankly they're incentivized to do so. So, hey, sell, but call me first and I'll make a vig on your practice. Shout out to Brady Frank.
Craig, question for
but
you.
I do think.
Let me ask you a question real quick, just as an analogy. Do you think you get, or Trey, either anyone actually, the three of you, do you guys think that you get better medical care because you actually know a thing or two about medicine, medical
Holy
care?
Shit, yes.
Well, for sure.
Do you think if you didn't have that level, so meaning you get that level of care, the physician hears you talk and immediately has to level up a little bit, right? And says, shit, I better bring my A game for this patient because they actually might catch me. Marketing companies do the same thing. Private equity is going to do the same thing. Have a conversation, be like, this dentist is an idiot, right? Or this dentist actually knows what they're talking about. They're using the terminology, they understand the terms, and they're using it appropriately in the context of this argument, right? So going back to the whole advocate thing, right? Like, I think you get more from people in your life by actually becoming a quasi expert, knowing a thing or two about a thing or two.
Oh, you need to.
right?
I mean, one of the first business courses I ever went to, like, if you don't know your numbers, you don't own a business, flat
You
out.
don't know your business. If you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business.
Exactly. You don't have a business. You're not worthy of being a business owner. You have to know a little bit
All right,
about
so
this
bring
stuff.
it up and let's bring some, if you wouldn't mind, Craig.
Yeah, of course, I got it.
So this gal that I followed and got this thread from, I just want to give, her name is Cody Sanchez. She does a lot of YouTube videos. She does a lot of things where she basically teaching the business, right? And it's not sexy businesses, it's laundromats, it's things like that. But she's, teaching people how to hustle essentially with business, but she's actually teaching in the process. So keep going forward.
Sorry. By the way, I just want to take a pulse. Dwight and Trey, are you both active and on Twitter, or is
not terribly active, but I read more than write.
And Trey, Twitter's a thing that's on your phone.
Well, look, it's the bird, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it a bird?
The bird.
Yeah. The bird.
Instagram is meant for entertainment, right? Twitter is more of like this community soapbox, if you will.
But it's really an interesting place. It's like
a lot of business gets done on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm reading a lot of people, like, they started 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and their business is catapulted. It's such an interesting space. I just recently got into it. It's like taking so much of my social media bandwidth. I only spend like 9.5 to 12 hours a day on social media. So it's hard to carve out, the additional time.
It's a meritocracy on, like, instead of trying to flex on the vacation that you may have like just gone on and taken the quick picture. It's or the jet that some of these influencers rent. Like, it's a meritocracy on intelligence, because it's nothing visual.
And it's pithy too. You have to make it good or not. I mean, to write a well-crafted, 2-3 sentences is hard. Anyway, just wanted to take a pulse on that. Twitter's awesome. I'm really enjoying it.
I'm just kind of interested. What about your comparison on Threads?
That's funny.
I was actually listening to a pod on that, Dwight, and I think Threads is going to succeed. I think it's going to take some business share from it's funny. It's like the battle going on between Zuck and Elon, and he basically just like cucked him and spent 1,000. Elon bought a business for $44 billion. Zuck pretty much recreated it for 1,000 times less. Right.
I mean, it's a pretty binary decision. Do you want your data resold? No, go on Twitter. Right. You do, go on Meta. I mean, it's simple.
Well, some people are dug in, right? Because, Craig, to your point, so many people. It's a new opportunity, though. If you want to become an influencer on a new platform, I think it's going to work. But so many people are dug in on Twitter, right? That's how they make their living, that they're probably going to stay. So
I think I'm going to make a gamble that Threads is obsolete.
A flash in the pan?
Yeah, I think it's a flash in the pan. If you look at the engagement, I mean, Zuck came out, started posting like crazy, then took like a 7-day hiatus from it. Like you go on Twitter and Elon's active. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know, because he's a polarizing figure, but he's active.
He's posting his memes.
Yeah, he's funny as hell, but he did it for a different reason. I don't underestimate. If that guy can land rockets, reuse rockets, I think that social media platforms are going to be easy for him to handle. Anyway, we'll go on.
So the first slide we get is really just getting excited about private equity and get excited about taxes. As we know, Randy's coming to speak at our summit, and he spoke to the mastermind about like the biggest expense in your life, and everyone's like, "What is that?" And he's like, it's taxes.
No one got that right, by the way. Everybody's like, education, electric, mortgage. He's like, no, shitheads, taxes.
No, it's taxes. Learn about taxes. And he's like, here's some good books, right? So like, get excited about equity, get excited about taxes. Not excited. Maybe excited is not the wrong word. Learn about the metrics in your business, and then just financing. Like, these are the Bears essentials. Go put them in practice. That's the key to learning business. Like, it's just a bunch of steps. So the thing that everyone talks about in dentistry, Ebitda. Okay, does anyone want to take a stab at what this really means, if we can break it down? So obviously the acronym is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Dwight, what would you, if you had to describe this, and what would you say, like if you're educating your mom on this, what would you say?
To me, Ebitda is I'm trying to make a dental comparison to.
All right, let me ask you this: how does it different from net revenue?
Net profit, you mean?
Sorry, net profit, Craig. Thank you.
Okay.
I like to say that EBITDA will take a complete picture of your business, top to bottom. It's like when people will differentiate things between unadjusted production to collections, but then you got to take into account your expenses, and then it just keeps going all the way down.
Why is it pervasive? I guess when we hear it, you hear it in dentistry thrown around a lot. You hear people chirping, like, "What's the EBITDA? What's the EBITDA?" Right? Like we throw that around.
Right.
Why do you think that's so pervasive in the private equity world?
Because that's the way it is in every other industry.
Okay. All right.
I think sometimes we get stuck with the idea that, I hear this stuff all the time. Well, my practice is worth, 85% of it's blah, 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 blah. And it's, and it's not hitting a profit, right? Like I hear so much of this. Well, I can get appraised for this amount, or you get this card in the mail. And the truth is they will promise you anything, but when it actually gets down to the nitty gritty, this is the final number that they're actually going to reflect off of.
Right.
And it's because it's the reality of it. Many of us know a lot of businesses out there, like even in the SaaS world, right? Even software and all these other things, they're incredibly profitable once they've developed something, right? But at the very beginning, they're a net negative.
Right.
It's the worst EBITDA on the face of the planet. It's not until it flips over, and they want to catch it at a particular vulnerable point, like a SaaS model. You want to catch it when that EBITDA is super low because they know where it's going. Once it starts to be profitable and a positive, then you know where this thing's going. And so the reality is this is the industry standard across all industries. This is kind of the point. Okay. So you're able to say it to any person who knows anything about finances and say, yeah, that's how it is. Because nobody's going to look at you and say, but at my practice, my patients love me more. Or it's all that emotional stuff gets thrown out. And this is what your business actually is.
This is the operating cost of your business.
The operating cost of your business.
Well,
so gross minus EBITDA is your cost.
Let me.
When you look at EBITDA is taking out all the below the line costs.
Sure.
If you go in and normalize debt service, you normalize things along those lines. This is how much it costs to run your business. It's what's left over after you subtract the operating costs.
There you go. All right. So if you take your past debts aside, right?
Sure.
All the owner benefits, you get healthcare, 401k, etc. It's an evaluation of the real cash flow of a business. So a private equity looks at this and is like, what's the benefit? If we buy this business for cash, what is the amount of dollars that's going to land in if we remove all the benefits from the owner and all the taxes that they had to pay and all the bullshit that doesn't apply to us, what's going to land on our side? And so here's the interesting part is that they're going to run something called equality of earnings, right? So this
dramatically known as a Q of E.
The Q of E
sends a chill down my spine.
Yes.
So, and by the way, Pete, just sort of cut you. There's something rattling on your desk, and me and when you're moving your arms or something. I'm sorry. I thought it was someone typing.
Okay, so the Q of E. So the quality of earnings is interesting in that, Dwight, like you're going back to your multiple thing. They may say, "Hey, Dwight, we'll give you a 13 times," and you're like, "That's fucking awesome. No one's offered me that before. I want to do that." Like, what do you think your EBITDA is around? I think it's around 1.5. No problem. Awesome. Let's roll with this. You get engaged for 3 months and you go through something called a Q of E. In the meantime of these 3 months, you are already romantically thinking about how you're going to spend this windfall of money, right? We already described the term sheet on what you're actually going to land in your account. But guess what? They're going to run what's called their Q of E. And so the 1.5 that you think you had from maybe you're being represented by your end or your broker, they're going to come back and be like, "Hey, Dwight, we're going to keep, you know what? We're going to keep that 13 because we like you. We really want to align with you and strategize with you, and affiliate with you, all the fancy words that mean we want to acquire you." But guess what? Your EBITDA came back at like 1.1 during our quality, our Q of E. And that was done by an independent firm. We have no control over that. But, obviously that's going to affect the numbers now.
Yep.
So you see how this becomes a mind F?
Well, they'll even go up to the fact that they'll be like, you know what? We know this is a big blow to you. We're going to give you a 14 times multiple, but it's still 1.1.
Well, they typically, in my
just
experience,
saying, whatever it takes to make the doctor emotion setback. Their goal is like with everything else. If you're buying a car, their goal is to keep you out of the logic realm and keep you in the emotional realm.
In emotional, right? Keep
That's a
you
good point.
That's
a good point.
100%. So I think that's really when we talk about Ebitda and we throw this around flippantly, right? Just the listener just needs to know, like, that's the real cash flow of the business, the real cash flow of the business. No owner benefit, no sneak cars in here, no 401k and stuff that you're putting aside, no paying your wife on salary, none of that. That's all. This all goes to the bottom line. And so typically your Ebitda is higher, well, almost always, than your net revenue, net profit, I should say, right? Than what your P&L is going to say. You don't figure out your Ebitda by taking 12 months of your P&L and adding it together. That is not an Ebitda.
No.
And that's what many people think it is, right? It's just my profit of my business. No. Okay. So I think we've exhausted this.
Yeah. Another thing just to add to that is like your coffee machine. That's $500 a month, or $6,000 a year. And at a 10, or let's call it an 8, that coffee machine, when you sell your business, is worth $50,000.
Right.
Because it's only $500 a month.
Well,
$6,000 a year.
I think what you're talking about is like the example of lunch, right?
Yeah, yeah.
When I was like, you're like, well, it's costing me $75,000 a year. I was like, well, no, potentially that is $1 million depreciation.
Expense, yeah.
Depreciation. Yeah.
Yep.
You're getting a haircut by $1 million on enterprise value on the multiple that you probably could get. You're like, holy shit.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right.
Multiple times over. It's not just that. What I hear often, I'll get a phone call of a doctor who's selling and they're having this conversation and they're like, but my wife is an office manager at one of our locations, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, of course they have all these rules and this and that. They're like, but I pay her like $100,000, and this and that. I was like, you do know she's going to go to zero, right? Like you do know that anything that comes to your pocket's going to go to zero.
100%.
And they're like, but she should be paid for blah, blah. I'm like, listen, all you need to understand is that $100,000 a year job that you're trying to give your wife is worth like $1.8 million at the end of this deal at an 8x multiple if you don't walk away from it right now. But that's the gameplay that he's talking about.
So Dwight, here's the interesting thing about that though. If you know that your wife really doesn't do anything, right? And you can prove that she really doesn't do anything for the practice, then that can be an add back to you, right? That can go, that the Q of E can actually,
absolutely.
Okay.
Unless if you hear all these emotional doctors who are like, but I really want my wife to have a job and go on from this. Or the worst one of all, the highest and worst one of all.
She's the first fire, by the way.
Yes. And overall, the worst one of all is us. We say, well, we'll sell, but we want an annual salary of blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, the point is if you're not putting it up in the deal, you're missing out on the long run. But most people need to have that dollar paycheck per month coming
Dwight, you're saying that doctors say, well, I need to make this amount of money post
$200,000 a year. It'll come out of your Ebitda.
Required salary.
And you know what they will say to that?
I would not. I would
no problem. No,
that's right. Absolutely.
They're going to tell you.
More.
Absolutely. We'll just put that right out of there. No problem. Of course they will.
It's like the car dealer analogy. Like I still
that this number is negotiable because much of the line items in your practice are discretionary, and you can make cases that some are and are necessary and some are not and are not necessary. So it is not a black and white figure. You're both pushing, one side pushing to increase it and the other pushing to decrease it.
100%. So Trey, thank you for that. That's amazing. So on your side, you're going to want to have a Q of E, which, and maybe not your broker, if you had a broker, and they're going to have a Q of E. And Trey, you're right. It is a justification on your side to justify it as high as possible. And on their side, it's to justify it as low as possible. So it is a dance. It is a game. And you're absolutely right. But this isn't a couple calls on the telephone. This is a 3-month enema.
Exactly.
All right.
So unfortunately, D Wizzle's got to drop out.
No.
Sorry, guys. I've held them
He's
off
had enough.
I can. We
Said
got a
he's
few of
done.
them out there. Keep going. Keep going, though. Maybe I'll
All
leave
right,
this
well,
on
you'll
and if
listen
I
to
can
the
run
red.
back in here.
All right, Dwight, one more. Ready?
Go.
Due diligence. We all know what due diligence is. It's just basically the shit you have to do in order to make an investment or research before buying and investing an asset. For example, I'm doing due diligence. I'm under contract for a piece of land. I'm doing due diligence on the land, soil testing, surveys, regulations, easements. That's all of the diligence of a property. Can you guys give me some examples of in a merger and acquisition standpoint? What would be some things that you would recommend as a diligence if you were acquiring a practice? What would be some things just off the top? This snowball.
Liens.
Chart audits,
Liens
right?
is
Would
a
that be
great
would that be due diligence? Chart audits.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, Dwight. This is
Verification of patient numbers.
there you
actual
go.
patient numbers, actual procedures completed, procedures by provider,
Tax returns.
tax returns for sure, details that relate to the actual clinical process, meaning if I lose this doctor, is the 80% of the production based on the one head and the set of hands of one individual. Everything that would delineate liability risk in purchasing an asset is the way I see a due diligence list. So whether it's liens or whether it's the office manager who literally runs everything is married to the doctor who's also selling, and it all is going to go in one heap pile of out, then that's a high liability practice. And I need to be prepared to be able to replace the whole team. Worst
All
case
right.
scenario.
What else? What
Time,
else?
timeline of transition. Doctor is fed up and he wants out in 30 days. That's like catching a falling knife.
Correct.
Yep. Okay.
Turnover, risk, right?
Staff salaries.
Staff salaries for sure.
Benefits that were
Hygiene
promised.
salaries is the biggie.
Philosophical alignment, by the way. So, like, if he's been watching
Correct.
bleeding gums and no perio, it's gonna be
Right.
hard. People are
Clinical
gonna leave.
alignment as my
Percentage, Greg. That's exactly right.
Yeah, my clinical team calls that clinical
Supervised neglect.
Negligence.
because we know that we go in there and we implement our perio program and we're going to lose a portion of that patient goodwill, right?
Why are you
Immediately.
probing me? Dr. Jones has never done that before.
Yeah,
what are you
what's
trying to
that?
sell me?
Yeah, he's been fine with that.
So, guys, I'm asking these. Does anyone have any more before I just go? And then, Dwight, I know you got to go. But basically, I'm including this because I think this is important. Going back to the whole private equity thing we're talking about, they're going to do exhaustive due diligence. To as part of the Q of E, but B, it's looking for opportunities where they have economies of scale. Right? Oh shit! These hygienists are highly underperforming. This practice is only doing 15% hygiene. We know we can get it to 35%, right? They may run their utilization stuff like Dwight does and say, God, these operatories, we know we can bring this in. If we sign up with X, Y, and Z plan, we can augment this. So they're looking at buying an underperforming asset through their due diligence and buying it and then applying their arbitrage and their leverage, which we're going to get to on the next subsequent slides. Would you guys agree that's probably one of the reasons? I mean, yes, they're checking their box from a protocol standpoint of like, yeah, we need to make sure we have these things, but it's really a dive to see where is the juice for them.
Agreed.
And you should be doing the same. When I say them, if you're a doctor who's listening to this and you are in the business of want to grow and scale, the fastest way to scale your operation is acquiring. Startups are not the fastest way.
Correct.
Right. So get good at due diligence, get good at kind of looking in under the hood. And that's why that first slide is like, love it, fall in love with this process. Because honestly, the better you become at this, you can actually audit your own practice that you're in, even if you're just going to stay at one location.
Someone asked me after this conversation, I was saying that we had our last podcast discussing kind of a deal, just like what we did, and it happened to be yours. And they said, how did y'all learn so much of that? And I said, my biggest key learning was acquisitions. I was evaluating and then realizing and acquiring a practice and then realizing I totally missed that.
You blew it. Yep.
I blew this and I screw that. And because of that, that's why I've gotten good at this. Now, I'm not saying that everybody needs to, and there's different ways to do it, but that has been my biggest learning tool to be able to kind of get through it. And honestly, a lot of individuals on the mastermind, they're also acquiring practices or acquiring their first practice or going through those things. And when we've done that, I've learned a ton watching them and realizing the abusers that are out there, and how, you know, a lot of those brokers really play games even on your side, not just on their side, on getting you the wrong, you know, hiding
like
certain
when
details.
you buy a used car, typically we all sell our cars when we really don't, this thing's breaking, I don't really want it anymore, let's get rid of this car. Right. The job of the buyer is to find out, like, why is that front suspension squeaking?
Right.
Why do I hear a valve clicking? Right. That's
why
kind of the
somebody
most
selling the
important
car.
thing.
Why is somebody selling the car?
Yeah,
exactly.
why are you selling
this car? Exactly, Dwight.
Yeah,
I'm moving to
Europe. Great.
Love you, buddy. Thanks for all that.
Thanks, Dwight.
Hey, Dwight.
Miss y'all. We'll see y'all soon.
The next two are kind of easy, just cash flow. We talk about this, Craig, and I think you mentioned it a fair amount in the Ebitda. So there's cash flow, that's money coming in minus the money going out, and that should always be a positive number. And that's represented on your P&L. The cash flow statement tracks cash flow over time, so you know where every dollar is going. And you also can identify trends with this, up or down. These are delivered from your CPA, and I would recommend that you are getting them no later as a lag indication than 2 weeks after the month has closed. If your CPA is delivering you data longer than that, it's academic. There's really nothing to do, right? You guys know what I'm saying by that? Okay, cool.
Of course.
And you need to push to get it as soon as possible.
As soon as possible, right? Because otherwise, there's no more levers. The levers the more time goes out from the data you get, the smaller the little levers get, because they don't really do much anymore, because it's data that happened in the past, right? So that's a lag indication. Anything more to add on this, guys? I mean,
I just simple. Like, that idea that cash is not king, cash flow is king, because cash left alone has no potential.
Wait, you're saying that cash flow is king, not cash?
Yes,
is king.
Cash is not king. Cash flow is king. So this idea when they tell you to sell, well, you have cash, and cash is king, and taking chips off the table, and shout out to Brady Frank again, like call me, but cash left alone has no. Cash is like potential. It has no use until it's deployed. So as soon as you have your cash and you screenshot it, you text it to your friends, you have the obligation to deploy it, because you realize you can't eat cash. You have to get cash flow.
Cash is a golden egg. Cash flow is the goose that laid the golden egg.
Perfect.
I think it's important to say, because I think we get very hung up on talking about a melting ice cube, but cash is important because you have to have it to deploy it. So you have to have liquidity as part of a personal balance sheet to be able to do the next deal that pops up in terms of real estate, practice, whatever you're doing that you want to invest that cash
dry
in.
Powder. That should be another.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's something that you always want to keep in mind, that accessibility to cash or your liquidity is important.
So Trey, different than an emergency fund?
Yes. If you're labeling it as an emergency fund, as you always see in the circles of wealth building, so to speak, an emergency fund is in fact an emergency fund. Stick it there and leave it alone. But if it's accessible, it doesn't have to be in a bank account.
Okay.
But who you talk to, depending on who you talk to, an emergency fund has all sorts of pieces to it. And as long as it's accessible and very accessible.
So go back to your melting ice cube. What were you going to say?
I do keep cash. So I keep cash in order to deploy it, but I only keep a period of, I keep cash so I have it that I can go, hey, here's a deal that popped up today. Here it is today.
Yeah,
but I want to be able to access other things that I can get to within a day or two that allow me to move very quickly as well. That's liquidity. And that could be equity.
Craig, talk about your strategy. I think it's good. So Trey, like you're saying, you got a day or two to get your hands on some money. It doesn't mean the physical dollar, but liquidity is important. Craig, so I'm guessing, Trey, you're putting yours in a floating money market where Trey, you're earning some yield?
Some.
Yeah. Craig, I think you're pretty good at kind of flushing things back and forth between maximizing your yield with your operating capital.
Well,
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, if I had to cut in broad brushstrokes, I'd say like looking back over the last 15 years, I was not prudent. I kept more cash than I should, because I have I guess a psychological need to have it, and the proverbial rainy day never came, and the opportunity also never came. So I was like, I want to keep this around because there might be something that I need real quick. And I think it's better to have, for those purposes, maybe a line of credit and had deployed my cash, because I've looked, now that I'm, the ripe old age of 52, I see the law of compounding interest and how it's dramatically affected my life, and deploying the amount of cash that I had above and beyond what I needed as the psychological buffer for me would have changed the game for me. So I carry more than I should. Like the land sale, I sold that other piece of land because I'm like, oh, we're going to go into a recession. I should hold on to this. And it's sat, albeit now the interest rates in the money markets are 4.5 to 5. That's great, but still that's not keeping up with inflation. So I've had a psychological need that has not benefited me, I think.
Well, I should introduce you guys at this point then to a digital stable coin called Bitcoin. It stays right at $30,000, and that's just where it sits.
Is that like Luna?
No, fuck, Trey, that's too soon. Still too soon. Too soon.
Yeah, he's very sensitive. Don't do that to him.
I only like to talk about my crypto wins, if you haven't noticed, not my losses. And that was a huge L. Holy shit. Yeah. All right. So let's move on from this.
Oh, sorry. I thought I'm advancing you.
You can do it. You can. We've got 2 more, and then that's it. So if you're listening, hang in there.
If you're listening and any of this has been valuable, can someone comment? Anyone? Just say good job, thumbs up. Comment right now. Subscribe or comment. Give us a like.
So this one's going to be a little bit longer, just to give you guys a help. But leverage is I think super, super important to understand it, because I think it's the true way that you can generate wealth. Actually, I think it's the only way you can really generate wealth. Agreed? Not agreed?
Agreed.
100% agree.
Absolutely.
Okay.
100%.
So leverage, when someone uses the word leverage, all they're saying is debt. They're just taking a debt instrument. It's your bank. Your bank is going to give you leverage. Your bank, or maybe someone else, or a mezzanine loan, or private investors, but it's someone else's money that you're going into debt for. Okay. So, and that's the whole thing of debt, like being good and not good, Greg. Like there's certain types of debt that are good and certain that are bad. Obviously, credit card bill, bad. Right.
Well, I think borrowing on a depreciating asset is.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah. I think that's full stop, right? I think we can dumb it down to that.
That's the compounding the wrong way. You owe more money and the asset is worth less. So you have double compounding interest the wrong way. So compounding interest works wonderfully like debt. It can work to your advantage, or it can fucking destroy you.
I think that's a great thing. And I think, Greg, you asked me why I buy like my cars and boats and stuff with cash. Sometimes you're like, and because I think I've ascribed to exactly what you're saying. The only debt I have is on a quote unquote appreciating assets. That's it. And I become very disciplined in the fact that if it's depreciating, which we all know boats and cars and shit like that is, then it should be, if I can't buy it, then I can't afford it. That's just the way I was raised, kind of thing. I'm not saying that should be everyone's thing, but I think that's a healthy mentality personally.
I don't.
I agree.
You what?
I don't think that's a healthy mentality.
Okay, why?
I think that is a legitimate reason. That is something that you can say at your level. But there are many times when you have to finance depreciating assets, even when you have appreciating assets, because your actual liquidity is not available for whatever reason.
Give me an example.
So let's say I keep I have X amount of dollars of liquidity, and we're gonna say that I want to buy a practice which I can finance for 100%.
That's appreciating asset.
A real estate deal that I have to invest and put my 20%, 25% down in. I take my liquidity, which is all I have, and I put it into my real estate. Now I need to buy a car, a depreciating asset. I have to finance the car at that time.
You don't have to. Okay, Trey, fine. I hear you on that. Do you have to drive an Audi A7?
No, but that's not what you said. That's different.
Okay. You're right.
So the idea there is you can't blanket statement that you should never finance a depreciating asset. There are times you should.
You've got $5,000 left over to buy a car.
So if you had $5,000, would you, after buying those things, your legitimacy of that would be buy the used Corolla that you found on the green sheet for $3,000?
100%.
I totally disagree.
I agree with Pete on this one. As a person who, like my first year of dental school, I made $85,000. What did I do? I went out and bought like an $85,000 Mercedes. So had I not done that, it felt great.
Now, so y'all are playing in extremes, though.
No,
I mean that's
those
me.
Examples are playing in extremes.
No, we're not. I think we're reflecting on the pain that we had in the past, knowing we messed up in certain areas. I did the same kind of thing. And I've also then like learned from that mistake and never did it again. And I think it was wise. So Trey, like I always advise dental students, like when you want to get out and be like, oh, I'm a dentist now, I need to have a dentist car. I'm like, hey, you're just try to live like a student for a couple more years. Keep driving the 10-year-old beater. It's no one's going to care, right? Like, don't go blowing your cash because you think that society expects you to have that.
No, I agree, but that's a different topic.
It's not though. It's not. You're telling me you're going to buy investments in business and stuff, and you can't afford a $5,000 car for cash?
No, you're not going to drive a $5,000 car.
Well, that's
you
on
just
you.
created an asset that creates cash flow.
Well, then that's a whole separate issue.
So what I'm saying is you're giving a very extreme example that I don't think is necessarily a good blanket.
I don't think it's extreme at all, as a matter of fact. I think it's very simple, meaning like you are not ready to buy that.
I think it comes from a standpoint of a very, where you are, it makes sense because you're a far cry from where
I did this, so I can say it like, all right. We're getting too tangential.
Well, I did the same thing. I was the douchebag that bought the Mercedes when I couldn't afford it. The only thing that's created real prosperity and security for me is living within my means. I didn't do that, and I was stressed out and beholden to everything. People lose their freedom because of money, and I want everybody to be free, whatever that means. And that means, if you're making $2 million a year and you're a rock star, but you're spending 2.2, you're broke. And I think it's really important because when you borrow for those depreciating assets, or you have double-digit credit card debt or 5-figure credit card debt, you're in a hole that can't be surmounted. And that's real for many people. And I'm not the damn Dave Ramsey guy that's like, no debt. Like, we have to make the nuanced decision between good and bad debt. And leverage is wonderful when you use it to your advantage, but it can unwind you very quickly. And the way to get unwound is borrow on things that are worth less every day that you borrowed on them. It's a very, I don't understand why you're seeing it differently, Trey. Help me understand.
Because that's a single example that doesn't always it doesn't unwind you. If you do it as an excess and you, like you say, you're the douchebag that buys the $85,000 Mercedes I am that. Yeah, that's true. I agree with those things, but it is not a good blanket statement to say across the board, because there are plenty of examples like the one I gave that is not appropriate. You're not going to go buy the Corolla. You're not going to do that. And although, yes, you may have, but you didn't need to. It was not necessarily the financial good thing
example. To do. Give me another example where you think this is not.
I gave you one, and it goes back to the same issue of I gave you one, you don't like it, you want another one.
No. You gave me one and we refuted it, saying like that's on them. If their ego can't drive a $5,000.
So my deal there would be you're buying an appreciating asset that then can afford the next depreciating asset. You do things in order to do things, and then you can pay them off later.
I'm gonna pull the Jake out. We'll take this offline. Next slide.
Hold on. I wasn't done. So I think it's important to talk about
the leverage.
Hold on. I just want to make sure that I'll be pithy with this. Sorry. That leverage happens in not just capital, right? Naval talks about this a lot, and he talks about this in 4 things: people, capital, code, right? Software platforms, and then your audience.
Yes.
Great. So we won't go into all those, but like there's lots of leverage in your business beyond just the debt. Okay. So that was enough on that. I won't. I feel like you guys are going to start snoozing. Do we have an and there we go. Okay. So balance sheet, we'll go quickly through these. Balance sheet is important. You're getting this from your P&L, but essentially what it shows is your assets of what you own and your liabilities of what you owe. It's the business medical chart, the business's dental chart of what it is. People always say like, hey, let me see your balance sheet and P and L. Not P, letter P, N, letter N, L, P and L. So anyway, balance sheet is important. Do you guys have anything to add on balance sheet? There's several types of balance sheets, but essentially the one you're going to get the most is it's called a comparative balance sheet, where it's going to indicate a trend over time, comparing different times in the business. There's vertical balance sheets, horizontal balance sheets, but essentially the comparative is probably the one that everyone's going to see. But essentially, just remember, it's what assets you have versus liabilities you owe. Okay, Craig, since you are the thing, keep going.
Yeah. Oh, so look at you. You give it to me and still do it. Okay.
I can't help it.
Yeah.
Profit. Of course, profit, we all know it is. Gross profit equals your revenue minus the cost to deliver the product. Pretty simple there. We all get the profit by our P&L at the end from our CPA. And we all open our emails from our CPA, and immediately where does our eyeballs go?
Bottom line. One thing I want to add to that, Peter, it's not just cost of product, it's cost of because we're in dentistry, it's the cost to the doctor to deliver the service. Well, so if you feel
so Craig, what that means is cost of the product, meaning the delivery of the product, the service of the product, all the intangibles that got to that product. And so
what I was trying to point out is that the solo doctor who says, yeah, my overhead is 35%, my profit is 70%. What do you pay yourself? Well, I make 70%. I know, but what would a dentist like you need to be paid? Oh, I don't know, 35%. Okay, put that in, because then you'll see your entrepreneurial profit, not just your real profit. What is the profit you generate for the work that you do, the business? So that's everything. It's entrepreneurial profit. It's above and beyond what your doctors get paid.
For sure. P&L, of course, we know it stands for profit and loss. It's the report card for your business. It's usually given to you by your CPA, and it is the lag indication of, like we were just talking about, the timeline of when you're going to get it. So it indicates what happened in the preceding month or quarter or all the months behind you, right? And so it is good to kind of review those and have them mapped over time to see where you are trending. Anything to add on the P&L, guys?
As an interesting thing, just shits and giggles, which timeframes do you both track on your P&Ls?
Monthly and yearly.
Year to date or trailing 12?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, that month and then year to date. Yes, I do not look at. I do a trailing 12-month Ebitda, but I do not do it on a profit and loss. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you bet.
I do trailing 12-month Ebitda, and I do year to date and this month versus last year. So
interesting.
Year to date versus last year. I always want to look at year
comparison.
Yeah, I always do that.
That's good.
Everything for me, for everything has no context unless it's year over year, which is interesting.
Good. Very good.
That's legitimate.
All right, last one, guys. So this is probably the favorite one. We talk about this a lot on the podcast, and it's called arbitrage. And so essentially, does anyone want to take a stab at kind of what arbitrage is at a definition layer?
I don't want to take that stab.
Trey?
I'll take a stab. Arbitrage is the difference between let's call it percent that can be, I'll use an example as the best way where I can case that, because I'm not going to get it right defining it. Yeah. A practice by itself, owned by a single individual, is worth 3x. A practice owned by someone, in Pete's example, for example, is a 10x. The 7x difference in between those two is Pete's arbitrage on that deal. He makes that money by just owning that practice as it is, whereas the single buyer does not.
Hunter, very well done. I think the arbitrage is taking the same asset and having it be worth something different in a different environment, right? So just like you said, Trey, in the solar practitioner that has a let's call it $1 million practice, it's worth 3 times earnings typically, which equals about 85% in a well-done practice, which is why we see the valuations there. In my ecosystem, if it was bolted on or acquired, potentially you could buy it for 3, and then day 2 of it being in our ecosystem, it could be a 10x, like you're saying. So those revenues could be inherently worth 7 times more, right? 7 times more turns, meaning it bought for 3 and it's worth 10. The delta in there is 7x of that Ebitda. And that can happen pretty quickly, which is why this consolidation is going on. We see the Instagram ads, right? And the time is running out. It's fast and furious, because there is massive arbitrage for people who have bigger more efficient vehicles. Okay, so that's another example of. I mean, that's Trey. I think that's a perfect example. I don't want to go into other examples. I think it's a perfect example of in dentistry when you hear the word arbitrage, that is really what it's going. It's roll-ups and arbitrage is what I typically hear those two words.
Justification of the roll-up.
Do what?
It's the justification of a roll-up. A roll-up exists because of the arbitrage.
But also remember how we were talking about in the due diligence, Trey? And so some of the arbitrage comes from actually looking at the practice from a diligence perspective, right? The research of saying, oh shit, doc here only has, hasn't done a crown in 3 years. And that's an arbitrage situation, or the hygiene is underperforming, or the docs are underperforming, whatever it is. There's arbitrage in that too, just isolated, not in the arbitrage of private equity, but just isolated in someone who's a better business operator. So there's still arbitrage for you, the person listening, to acquire practices, even though you're not a giant private equity. That's it. That's it, dudes. That's
Easy
it.
concept.
I like
fun?
it.
Is
There
that
you go.
fun?
Everybody is now educated and ready to go.
Or asleep? One of the two.
Well done. Let's go buy some. Let's go buy some practices.
Well, let's see you at the summit is really what we meant to say.
There you go.
Hey, and one more thing. If you got any value from this whatsoever, please drop a comment below. We read all the comments. I read all the comments. Peter's faster than I am, but we read all the comments. And just so you know, Trey, we actually put this on YouTube so you can comment. YouTube's almost like your TV screen, but on a computer.
Yeah.
Not to be confused.
It's not going to be as good as my bird comment. It's harder for me to make the bird comment.
Not to be confused with you porn, where Trey spends most
I'm
of
very
his free
familiar.
time.
I'm very familiar
Yes,
on that one. That's different.
Yes.
I spend 8 to 12 hours like you on Twitter, but on that one.
That's good stuff.
No, that's me. Craig spends it on Instagram.
Oh, Instagram.
Yeah. No, but I'm loving Twitter, guys. Wow, so cool. Get on Twitter.
Have you just gotten into it?
Just recently. Yeah, because I didn't want to have another social media spot to check. But
my wife always says to me, she's like, "You're really not that smart. You just read a bunch of shit on Twitter. That's why everyone thinks you're smart." I'm like, "Thanks."
Yeah, I agree with your wife, by the way, because the comment you put on Michael Moreno.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
So you follow Strip Mall Guy, right? And Strip Mall Guy posts something yesterday and says it's not about option. The worst thing you can do is option. You got to be careful with your options, because your options are tenant friendly and they're not good for you. They lock your flexibility in. So Pete posts that on Michael Moreno's post and gets a whole bunch of likes, but you're good at. I'm the same.
He's a curator.
Yeah, I'm a curator too. If you steal from one, it's plagiarism.
I've always said that. Like, dude, when we went in a mastermind, remember we were talking about options and people were showing us their leases. I was like, options are designed for.
I know. I'm just messing with you.
I know, but
all knowledge is borrowed.
Exactly. And sometimes it's good to just exposed, and you're like, oh shit, yeah, I need to do that kind of thing. Just like the summit, right? Yeah. We go, and you get exposed to all these new techniques and tactics, and you have these conversations, and you come home just busting at the seams of shit you want to implement, and that's what gets you fired up in the morning, man.
Yeah.
All right,
I agree.
That was fun, guys.
Do nothing for 12 months and go back to the summit next year.
What?
Yeah.
Then you forget it, do nothing for 12 months. You go back to the summit next year.
You know what? You're probably right. The masses probably do that, but we have, you've actually know a lot of them, Trey. I mean, we've had some stories. People just I'm just
rubber to the road.
Fucking
with you on it, but no,
I know,
that's true, and that's impressive. When you have an implementer of that caliber, it is so cool to watch.
Hey, Peter, just a little validation for you before we hang up. As we're talking, because the AI corner, and you think I'm giving you shit. Immediately I text my marketing person, hey, I think we need to upgrade to Google Analytics 4. Peter Boulden says we must do it, and also said it's a pain. Yes, your site was moved to G4 Analytics months ago, so you're good to go. So just so you know, I may feign lack of caring, but I listen to I hang on every word you say, Peter Boulden, every fucking word.
Well, good, because I'm here to make sure that you keep succeeding, buddy.
And with that, follow Trey and his new Twitter handle, Brokeback 2626.
What is 2626?
I don't know. Just made that shit up.
All right,
guys, gotta go.
The only thing available. He got the handle for you.
Yeah, Craig's got the original. I get it.
Craig's got 25.
All right.
All right, everybody.
Guys.
We'll see you later. Enjoy it, fellas.
I enjoyed it.